So if you look at the 25-26 budget column here, approximately 16,573,000. That's what was budgeted for this year. The actual is slightly different. That number I can get for you, I don't know, have it off the top of my head. But it's somewhere in that range of 16,500,000.
Is it above or below?
The actual, I would have to check.
Since we don't have a state budget, we don't know what we're really necessarily getting for state aid. Do you think, from what you are hearing from people who do the fiscal planning, would we think it would go up, or it's just because of the whole harmless, what we get is what you already touched on?
Correct. So in terms of the expense-driven aids, those are always going to be, they're never going to be exact, right? We do our best projections to figure out what we think we're going to get for expense-driven aids. That we have a pretty good idea of. The foundation aid is the piece that really is at the state level, they're making a determination of what that percentage increase is going to be. For hold harmless districts, in recent years, it has been a minimum increase of 2%. So in our budget development, that's what we have built in, is roughly that 2% increase. If the final state budget actually has us getting less, we are past that point, right? The budget development process has been solidified, this will go out to voters, so these numbers are solidified. If we actually get less from the state, that just means next year we're getting less revenue than we had projected. That is something that I would be aware of in terms of how we spend money next year. We would have to be very cautious to make sure that we're now staying within what our new revenue amount is. You're welcome.
I don't need the mic. I don't think I need the mic.
I'm John Walker, I'm from Medusa. I am not an educator, but I have a family that's full of educators. One thing that I was curious about, because it's my personal belief, that with all of these categories, what really is at the heart of education is the student and the teacher. And you talked about student enrollment going down, and therefore the number of teachers going down, but do you have a sense of how that ratio looks this year or in the proposed year compared to previous years? So if there's 3 less teachers, does that mean that it's class sizes of 25 going to 27, or any kind of metric that might show that change? Did that make sense?
It did. So in terms of class size, you really have to look at it by building. Again, I don't have all those numbers in front of me. You can find that information in our budget documents from our program proposal, or I can pull it up and share it with you specifically after tonight's meeting. But you really want to look at it by each building. Because at the elementary school, class sections work differently than middle school, work differently than high school. In terms of total, like if you just take the total number of students and total number of faculty, staff, and do a division, if that's what you're talking about, it's not drastically different because again, the enrollment number is going down slightly, and we have over the past couple of years not filled some positions each year. I will also add to that, in terms of total number of staff positions, we added a number of positions during COVID because we received additional funds, COVID funds. Those funds expired a couple of years ago. We held on to some of those positions as long as we could to do the maximum amount of good work with those positions. With that said, looking at next year, the total number of staff were approximately where we were prior to COVID. So in a way, when we added some of these positions, we've held on to some of them, but over time, we've also had to reduce back to get to the point kind of where we were prior to getting those additional funds. If you want to know specific numbers in terms of ratios, I can certainly pull that for you. I just don't have it in front of me tonight.
Okay, and you don't need to do that now, obviously. But I'm also just a little bit concerned with the term staff. And my concern is about, is it total staff? Is it classroom staff? I don't know exactly how to make that differentiation, but to me, it always made sense
that the critical component is the person in the front of the classroom, or maybe now they walk around a whole lot more, okay? And the student. So that's the ratio that really makes sense. And if you're saying to yourself, well, what this guy's saying is maybe administration is a little top-heavy, I'm not saying that yet, but I think that's something that you always have to watch. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just a couple of general questions. Do you get any federal aid?
We do.
What's about how much?
So federal aid is not factored into the budget that we presented tonight. So everything that we presented tonight is general fund, meaning the amount that we set as our budget for the year, and then based really on the revenue side, the taxes and state aid. In terms of federal, we do get title funding, that is entitlement grants. The total amount, I would have to look up, I don't have that in front of me either, but it's under $2 million. It's not a huge number. The majority of that does go to some of our special ed programming as well as teaching positions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And another question would be, what generally goes into employee benefits?
The biggest factor there is, as I mentioned before, the health insurance and the prescription cost that goes with it as well. There's also Medicare and FICA and Social Security, and then if they're the teacher side, it's the teacher retirement system. On support staff, it's the employee retirement system. All goes into that number. The most significant number there are the health insurance.
And lastly, what is pilot? P-I-L-O-T or something?
Yep, so pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So those are agreements that certain landowners have made with the county. So in place of having their property assessed at a new higher level and paying taxes on that amount, they do what's called a payment in lieu of taxes, and we get a separate payment that doesn't come through the process of collecting taxes. It's just a straight payment from that landowner to the district. And they're usually, they have a specific time frame to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When does this electric bus mandate kick in? And is there any chance of it getting under the census converted?
Also a good question. So currently the mandate is still on the books for 27, 28. Meaning that 26, 27, the proposed budget that we just talked about, would be the last year that we can purchase a diesel bus. The state over the past year has listened to feedback and certainly has gotten a significant amount of feedback from across the state. So they put out a waiver that districts could apply for, and you had to demonstrate that one, you were working on what it would look like for you as a district to do that. So we went through a study last year that came to look at Greenville specifically and what it would look like for us as a district to implement EV buses. So part of the waiver, you had to show you're actually working towards it as expected. That waiver we submitted sometime at the end of winter, early spring. The state has said they will not be reviewing them until July, so sometime this coming summer. My hope is that we would get that waiver. And from what I'm hearing from around the state is as long as you're able to show you meet the criteria, that you fill out this form, the waiver form, which we did, that we would get that waiver. That waiver is good for 2 years, so it pushes it out for us for at least 2 years. There's no guarantee there, but that's the current, what the state has put out as an option for districts is to do the waiver. Yep, so Tracy's just reminding me, the flip side of that mandate is that by 2035, you can't be running any diesel buses at all. So right now, 27, 28 is the year you can't buy any more diesel buses, and then by 2035, you'd actually have to be done with diesel buses altogether and be all electric. Some of the concern in my role is that while there's been conversation about shifting that starting point, there has not been much conversation or talk about what happens on the other end of 2035. So if that mandate holds, we also don't want to push off purchasing electric buses so far that then we're in a jam, that in 2034, we have to suddenly purchase a huge number, we would not let that happen. But that is the other constraint that goes along with the topic of EV buses.
How many buses do we have?
Good question. 27, somewhere in that range.
So if this mandate does go, and we have to buy electric buses, how many will we be buying?
Yep,
And
so
how are we gonna afford them?
when we readjusted our bus replacement cycle a few years ago when the mandate came out, with the idea that 27, 28 was the first year that we would have to buy an electric bus, that replacement cycle currently right now has us buying 1 or 2 EV buses in 27, 28. If we were forced to, that's, right? If the waiver didn't come through, that was what the original plan was. That bus replacement cycle then would have us replacing buses each year between now and 2035 to get to a point where we have all of them by 2035. Back to Rich's point, hopefully the state has listened to this, the waiver is extending it, hopefully the state listens to the concerns and makes further adjustments, but right now we're working with the information the state has put out to the best of our ability to project and plan the best that we can.
Do we know what electric bus costs?
We do. They typically cost more than 3 times what a diesel bus costs. So in the range of $400,000, it's a significant expense. With that, they are aidable, so we would still get transportation aid on those purchases, we just still an increased expense.
So what happens if we decide as a district to ignore that mandate and not purchase the buses or follow through on it?
So there's 2 pieces to this. One is for our facility, our actual physical facility and campus to be able to do what it needs to for EV buses, we would have to do work with our infrastructure. And that was part of the study that I mentioned earlier. Part of that study included what we would have to do for facilities wise. So that's kind of part 1, because we don't want to, if we get to a point where we are following the mandate and we're purchasing an EV bus, we also don't want to purchase an EV bus and bring it to campus and not be able to do what we need to do with it, right? So part 1 is that facilities piece. To do that, that would require voter approval. Right? The voters would have to approve a referendum that would include capital work to do that facilities work. So that's one place that voters could put your vote to work and decline that offer, or decline that referendum. Part 2 of that would be just like you saw in the budget tonight, there is bus acquisition. So when we get to the point where if it is an EV bus, that would be communicated. What you're voting on is the purchase of an EV bus. That's another opportunity is that voters have a chance to have their voice heard. Both of those scenarios have been many, many times in terms of what happens if, and there's still not a clear, defined answer to that. One of the answers for districts that maybe did do this and there was a no vote, that was now part of the waiver. That was a question on that waiver form. Have you put up a referendum for EV bus infrastructure and it was voted down? You check yes, you got a point towards this waiver. So in the short term, what that might do is just extend the waiver longer, but we don't know, right? Right now the waiver is in place, but that doesn't mean it'll be in place in 4 years from now. We don't know.
In general, if there are other mandates aside from the EV bus mandate, and the district decides not to follow a certain mandate, what happens? Do we get fined? Do we lose out on aid? What happens?
So it tends to be the threat is that you lose out on aid, whether that's transportation aid or other aid. Is that happening now across the state? No. But if you're asking the question, what does the state have the ability to do to us as a district if we do not follow mandates? It is withholding aid. That is kind of that concern of what would that look like if we didn't. So we have about 2 minutes. If there's one more question, if not, we will wrap it up. Again, if you have further questions, by all means, you can reach out to me or reach out to Daphne at district office. We're happy to answer any of your questions.
On this vote that we're taking, board seats,
There's been a lot of conversation about that and the different variables, the different computations, I should say. All right, well, thank you.